It does not.
The tension had been building for months, simmering beneath the surface of every WWE broadcast like a volcano waiting to erupt. Everyone in the wrestling world knew it was coming. The question was never if, but when. Roman Reigns, the self-proclaimed tribal chief and undisputed head of the table, had made his intentions crystal clear in a way that sent shockwaves through the entire WWE universe. The declaration was simple, direct, and terrifying in its certainty. Whenever Brock Lesnar shows his face, whenever Paul Heyman appears in his presence, Roman Reigns will attack. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. This wasn't just another wrestling rivalry or a storyline designed to sell pay-per-view events. This felt different, deeper, more personal than anything we had seen in years. The history between these three men was complicated, layered with betrayal, loyalty, and years of intertwined destinies. To understand the explosive promise Roman made, you have to understand how these relationships were forged in fire and broken by ambition. You have to look back at the journey that led to this moment of declared warfare. Roman Reigns had transformed himself over the past few years into something wrestling had never quite seen before. Gone was the smiling babyface who sought the approval of the crowd. In his place stood something far more dangerous, a calculating champion who viewed himself not just as the best wrestler in WWE, but as the very foundation upon which the company stood. He called himself the tribal chief, spoke of acknowledging him, and built a family structure around himself that demanded absolute loyalty. His championship reigns had been historic, his matches legendary, and his presence utterly dominant. But there was a crack in his armor, a wound that had never quite healed. That wound had a name: Paul Heyman. The special counsel to Roman Reigns, the wise man who had stood by his side through his rise to absolute power, had a history that predated his allegiance to the tribal chief. Before he was whispering in Roman's ear, before he was carrying the championship and orchestrating victories, Paul Heyman had been the advocate for Brock Lesnar. Their partnership had been one of the most successful in WWE history, with Heyman's words perfectly complementing Lesnar's devastating actions. When Heyman had aligned himself with Roman Reigns, it had been portrayed as a business decision, a recognition of who truly ruled WWE. But the question had always lingered in the air like smoke: where did Heyman's true loyalty lie? With Roman Reigns, the man who currently held all the power? Or with Brock Lesnar, the beast incarnate who Heyman had guided to multiple championships and countless moments of destruction? That question had created an undercurrent of tension that informed every interaction, every promo, every championship defense. Brock Lesnar had been away from WWE for a while, pursuing other interests as he often did, living his life on his terms as only someone of his stature could. But rumors had been swirling for weeks that the beast was returning. Social media was ablaze with speculation, with supposed insider reports claiming that Lesnar's return was imminent. And everyone knew what that return would mean. It would mean a confrontation with Roman Reigns was inevitable. It would mean that Paul Heyman would be forced to choose a side once and for all. It would mean that the uneasy peace that had existed in WWE's main event scene was about to shatter spectacularly. Roman Reigns was not a man who waited for threats to materialize. He was proactive, strategic, always thinking several moves ahead like a chess master surveying the board. So when the rumors of Lesnar's return reached a fever pitch, when it became clear that the beast was coming back to WWE, Roman made his move. He appeared on Monday Night Raw with that familiar confident swagger, flanked by the members of his bloodline, and he took the microphone to address not just the live crowd, but everyone watching around the world. The arena fell silent as Roman stood in the center of the ring. There was something different about him that night, something more intense in his eyes, something more dangerous in his posture. He wasn't there to deliver one of his typical promos about acknowledgement or tribal leadership. He was there to declare war, and everyone could sense it. The tension in the building was palpable. You could feel it pressing down on everyone present, making it hard to breathe as they waited for what he would say. Roman spoke slowly, deliberately, letting each word carry its full weight. He talked about respect, about loyalty, about what it meant to be the tribal chief. He spoke about his championship reign, about how he had carried WWE on his back for years, about how he had elevated everyone around him. Then his tone shifted, became harder, colder. He mentioned Brock Lesnar's name, and the crowd erupted. Some cheered at the prospect of seeing the Beast again, others booed, but all reacted with genuine emotion to the mere mention of that name. But Roman wasn't finished. He spoke about Paul Heyman, his voice taking on an edge that made it clear this was the real issue. He talked about trust, about family, about what happens when someone even thinks about betraying the head of the table. The camera caught Heyman standing at ringside, and his expression was complex, a mixture of concern, calculation, and something that might have been fear. Roman's words were painting him into a corner, forcing him to confront the reality that his past with Lesnar and his present with Reigns were on a collision course. Then Roman made his declaration, the statement that would define everything going forward. His voice rose, filled with absolute conviction and barely controlled rage. He said that when Brock Lesnar returned, whenever he showed his face in a WWE arena, Roman Reigns would be there to destroy him. There would be no waiting for scheduled matches, no formal challenges, no playing by traditional rules. The moment Lesnar appeared, Roman would attack. And if Paul Heyman was anywhere near Lesnar when that happened, he would suffer the same fate. Roman made it clear that he considered Heyman's even being in Lesnar's presence as the ultimate betrayal, one that would be met with immediate and brutal consequences. The crowd's reaction was explosive. This was the kind of raw, emotional declaration that transcends typical wrestling promos. This wasn't about championships or main events or WrestleMania matches. This was about pride, betrayal, and dominance. Roman was essentially saying that he owned WWE, that anyone who challenged his authority would be met with violence regardless of time, place, or circumstance. It was a dictator's declaration, a line drawn in the sand that dared anyone to cross it. Social media immediately went into overdrive. Wrestling fans around the world began speculating about when Lesnar would return, where the first confrontation would happen, and whether Heyman would actually dare to be near Lesnar when it occurred. The WWE universe was split in their reactions. Some fans were excited about the prospect of such an unpredictable and violent feud. Others expressed concern that this level of animosity, even in a scripted environment, might lead to genuinely dangerous situations. Everyone was talking about it, which of course was exactly what WWE wanted. The following weeks on Raw were electric with anticipation. Every segment felt like it could be the moment when Brock Lesnar's music would hit and all hell would break loose. Roman Reigns appeared each week, sometimes defending his championship, sometimes just standing in the ring surveying his kingdom, always with that dangerous edge that suggested he was ready for Lesnar to appear at any second. Paul Heyman walked a tightrope, staying loyal to Roman in word and deed, but with an expression that suggested he was constantly calculating, constantly preparing for the inevitable moment when his two worlds would collide. The WWE production team did a masterful job of building the tension. Random backstage segments would show Roman Reigns walking through hallways, his head on a swivel, clearly ready for an ambush. The Bloodline members were constantly on high alert, acting as Roman's personal security force, checking every corner and entrance as if Lesnar might materialize at any moment. This created an atmosphere of paranoia and impending violence that kept viewers glued to their screens, afraid to look away in case they missed the moment everyone was waiting for. Then the rumors became more concrete. WWE began releasing cryptic videos and messages on their social media channels, featuring agricultural imagery and references to beasts. Longtime fans recognized these as calling cards for Brock Lesnar's return. The speculation reached a crescendo. Would he return at the next Raw? Would it be at a premium live event? Would WWE even announce his return, or would they let him just appear out of nowhere to maximize the shock value? Paul Heyman's position became increasingly precarious. Roman Reigns began making pointed comments about loyalty, about family, about what happened to those who even thought about betraying the tribal chief. Heyman would nod along, affirm his loyalty, but you could see the conflict in his eyes. He was being forced to publicly declare his allegiance to Roman while knowing that his history with Lesnar was about to come back in a major way. It was psychological torture, and Heyman sold it perfectly, showing the strain of a man caught between two monsters. The SmackDown roster seemed to be holding its breath. Wrestlers who were usually competing for their own championships and feuds found themselves constantly aware that at any moment, their show could be overtaken by the Reigns-Lesnar situation. The sense that something massive was about to happen pervaded every aspect of WWE programming. Commentary teams on all shows regularly referenced Roman's declaration, building it up as one of the most serious threats ever made in WWE history. Behind the scenes, according to wrestling journalists and insiders, the WWE creative team was carefully planning every aspect of what would happen when Lesnar finally returned. They knew they had something special here, a genuine buzz and anticipation that doesn't come along often in modern wrestling. The key was executing the eventual confrontation in a way that lived up to the massive expectations that had been built. It couldn't just be a standard brawl. It had to feel chaotic, dangerous, and unpredictable, true to Roman's promise that he would attack Lesnar on sight regardless of circumstances. The speculation about when and where the first attack would happen became a favorite topic for wrestling podcasts and YouTube channels. Some predicted it would happen during a Roman Reigns championship match, with Lesnar interfering and triggering Roman's promised response. Others thought it might happen backstage, with cameras catching a genuine brawl in hallways and locker rooms. Some fans even theorized that it might happen outside of a WWE arena altogether, with both men's real-life animosity spilling over into a genuine confrontation. The beauty of Roman's declaration was that it made anything seem possible. Roman Reigns continued to dominate on SmackDown, dispatching challengers with increasing ruthlessness. But there was always an edge to his victories now, a sense that he wasn't fully satisfied with any win because the opponent wasn't Brock Lesnar. His interviews and promos constantly circled back to his promise, reminding everyone that he was waiting, that he was ready, that the moment Lesnar appeared, violence would follow immediately. It was masterful character work, showing a champion who was paranoid and on edge despite his dominance. The Bloodline's role in all of this was also fascinating to watch. Jey Uso and Solo Sikoa were positioned as Roman's enforcers, his insurance policy against Lesnar's inevitable return. But both men knew that if Brock Lesnar truly wanted to get to Roman Reigns, they would likely only be speed bumps in his path. The Beast Incarnate had destroyed bigger and tougher competitors than them. This created an interesting dynamic where the Bloodline appeared powerful in regular situations, but seemed to understand they might be outmatched when Lesnar finally appeared. Their loyalty to Roman was absolute, but their confidence seemed to waver when the subject of Lesnar came up. Paul Heyman's promos during this period were some of his best work in years. He had to constantly praise Roman Reigns while being very careful not to say anything negative about Brock Lesnar that would burn that bridge completely. He spoke in his trademark verbose style about Roman's greatness, about his own role as wise man and special counsel, about the glory of the tribal chief's reign. But careful listeners could hear the hedging in his words, the carefully constructed sentences that technically pledged loyalty to Roman without completely condemning Lesnar. It was the verbal equivalent of walking a tightrope, and Heyman navigated it with the skill of someone who had spent decades talking his way out of dangerous situations. The WWE Universe began creating signs and chants anticipating the collision. "We want Lesnar," chants would break out during Roman segments, not out of disrespect for the tribal chief, but out of genuine desire to see the confrontation happen. Roman would often glare at the crowd during these chants, his face showing barely suppressed rage that the fans would dare chant another man's name in his presence. It added another layer to his character, showing his paranoia and obsession with Lesnar had reached a point where even the mention of his name was triggering. Then came the night that changed everything. Raw was emanating from a major arena, the crowd was hot and ready for whatever WWE had planned. The show was progressing normally through its first hour, with various matches and storylines playing out. But there was an electricity in the air, a sense that something was going to happen. The WWE production truck was reportedly on high alert, ready to capture whatever might unfold. Security throughout the arena had been visibly increased, adding to the sense that management was preparing for something significant. Roman Reigns wasn't even scheduled to appear on this particular Raw. He was a SmackDown superstar, and brand separation had been relatively strict lately. But everyone knew that his declaration transcended brand lines. He had said whenever Brock Lesnar appeared, he would be there to attack. It didn't matter if it was Raw, SmackDown, a premium live event, or a random house show. Roman had made a promise, and his character's credibility depended on keeping it. About halfway through the show, during what was supposed to be a standard mid-card match, the arena suddenly went dark. The match stopped, the competitors confused and looking around. The crowd began to buzz with excitement and anticipation. Then that familiar, terrifying music hit. Brock Lesnar's theme thundered through the arena's sound system, and the place absolutely erupted. Fans jumped to their feet, screaming in excitement and disbelief. The moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. But Lesnar didn't appear alone. As the music played and the lights came back up, the Beast incarnate stood on the entrance ramp, and beside him was Paul Heyman. The wise man, despite all of Roman's warnings and threats, had chosen this moment to publicly align himself with his former client. Or perhaps Lesnar had simply taken what he considered his, reclaiming the advocate who had been by his side for so many years. Either way, the sight of them together was like throwing gasoline on a fire. The two men who had been in the ring for the match wisely slid out and retreated up the ramp, wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. The commentators were losing their minds, their voices rising with genuine excitement and concern. They were talking over each other, trying to process what they were seeing while also anticipating what everyone knew was coming next. Brock Lesnar had appeared on Raw, and Paul Heyman was with him, which meant that according to his own declaration, Roman Reigns had to attack them immediately. The cameras cut backstage, showing frantic activity. Production assistants and wrestlers were running around, clearly responding to some developing situation. Then the cameras found what they were looking for: Roman Reigns storming through the backstage area, his face a mask of absolute fury. The bloodline was with him, all of them moving with purpose toward the entrance area. This wasn't going to be a scheduled match or a carefully choreographed segment. This was going to be chaos, exactly as Roman had promised. Lesnar and Heyman stood in the ring now, with Paul taking the microphone to deliver what would likely have been some masterful promo explaining his decision, justifying his return to Lesnar's side, perhaps throwing some verbal barbs at Roman Reigns. But he only got about 3 sentences out before Roman's music hit, cutting him off mid-word. The Tribal Chief's theme music was like a declaration of war, and when Roman appeared on the entrance ramp flanked by the bloodline, the look on his face made it clear that talking time was over. Roman didn't walk to the ring. He ran. The bloodline charged down the entrance ramp right behind him, and Brock Lesnar, reading the situation perfectly, didn't wait in the ring. He rolled out and met them at ringside, and that's when all hell broke loose. Roman and Brock collided with the force of 2 freight trains, fists flying, both men trying to overwhelm the other through pure aggression and violence. The bloodline tried to swarm Lesnar, but the Beast shrugged them off, his supernatural strength allowing him to fight multiple opponents simultaneously. The brawl spilled all over the ringside area. Bodies crashed into barricades, sending the steel structures flying. Roman and Brock were trading devastating strikes, each blow landing with sickening impact. Security personnel flooded the area, but they were completely overwhelmed by the sheer violence and chaos. Referees tried to separate the combatants, but they were brushed aside like insects. This wasn't a match, this was a fight, and everyone involved was making it look as real and chaotic as possible. Paul Heyman had wisely retreated to a corner, trying to stay out of the physical altercation while still maintaining a presence. His face showed a complex mixture of excitement at seeing his former client in action and fear about what Roman might do to him for standing with Lesnar. The camera occasionally cut to him, showing his reactions to the violence unfolding before him, his expressions adding emotional depth to the physical chaos. Roman managed to get some separation and grabbed Brock, attempting to drive him through the announce table. But Lesnar blocked it, reversing and sending Roman crashing into the ring steps instead. The metallic clang echoed through the arena, and the crowd gasped at the impact. JUSO tried to capitalize on Lesnar being distracted, leaping at him from behind, but Brock caught him in midair and delivered a devastating German suplex on the floor. Solo Sikoa fared better, managing to land some hard strikes, but even he eventually fell to an F5 that Lesnar delivered with disturbing ease. With the bloodline temporarily neutralized, it was once again just Roman and Brock, circling each other like predators. Both men were breathing hard, showing the physical toll of the brawl, but neither showed any sign of backing down. They locked up again, and this time Roman managed to land a Superman punch that rocked Lesnar backward.